Okay, here's a question that I got today. My property needs a lot of work, and should I sell my home to an investor? There's a tenant in the property, and I don't want to necessarily do all the work. And should I sell to an investor? So that is let me unpack how all this works. Let me unpack how the investment business works, so that you can make an educated decision based on your situation, based on your time frame, based on your needs, right? Because the answer is it depends, right? A lot of it depends. So when you, by definition, sell to an investor's job is to buy it for the least amount of money, improve it in some way, shape, or form, and then get a profit, right? That's what investors do. So buy low, fix, and sell high, right? And so many times a seller might think, well, let's say the house needs $30,000 worth of work. They might say, well, I want to sell it to an investor and I'll just discount the house by $30,000, right? And the investor would buy it for that. And it doesn't work that way, right? It's never a dollar for dollar return. There's a multiple, right? 3-time, 4-time multiple, whatever that number may necessarily be, right? So if it costs $30,000, well, that could be a $90,000 delta, right? In the mind of the investor, what they got to pay for that house. In fact, the investors have a very specific formula. Depends a little bit on what's happening in the marketplace, but currently they're going to look at the after repair value, like what's it worth fixed up, minus 75%. They're going to take that number and actually multiply it by 75%, right? So 75% of the ARV, the after repair value, minus the cost of the renovation. And then that is their bottom number, right? That's the number. That's actually really their top number. That's the number that they need to buy it for. So sometimes they make the offer slightly below that so that they can work their way up to that. But that is the number, right? And in many instances, it is a really low number, right? The seller's like, oh my God, that is really low. Now, why would somebody take that? Well, convenience could be one of them, right? The second reason, maybe they don't have the money or the funds to fix it up themselves. And so they're like, okay, well, I'm just going to get the equity that is in it. Speed, right? Like they just want to solve the problem now. Maybe there's some kind of deadline that's happening where they just need it solved within a 10-day period, right? And so the investor comes in and says, I'll offer cash. And this is my number and I could solve the problem and you could just give me the keys and walk away and I'll solve this problem for you. And the investor typically solves it with knowledge, solves it with money, and solves it like they're making an investment in bringing this property back, right? But there are other options than just selling it to one investor. You can create leverage among many investors and use the power of the MLS and other social media platforms to attract multiple investors at one time, to get them to compete against each other, and hence get you more money in its as-is condition, right? So that's a strategy that we often do. We create leverage that way for people that don't want to put any money into their property. The other option, and this is becoming more and more prevalent around larger teams, or some companies are doing this, where we'll lend the money to renovate the property, to bring the property to full market value, and the seller can defer that cost to settlement. So they're gonna make more money in the long run, but it's gonna take more time. It might take, a month to renovate, month and a half to renovate. Could be less depending on the work, right? And then another month and a half to sell. So you're talking about 3 to 4 months, right? From beginning to end. And the seller has to say, well, does that make sense for my situation? Am I willing to wait? Do I want to do that? Do I want to put the money into it? Why not just take the money that I have now and, let them deal with it? So it's a very personal question depending on the seller's circumstance and situation, right? So if there is somebody living in the rental property, I will tell you, 99% of the time, it makes sense to move them out before you list the home. Do some basic, what I call polishing the penny, and then putting it back on the open market, you know, after some fresh paint and mulching and cleaning and, you know, and maybe fixing some stuff that's broken. Just, I call it polish the penny. Put it back on the open market and sell it for more money, right? Because the tenant, having the tenant in the property normally restricts who can buy that home, right? If the lease is good for another 6 months, well, the only person that could buy it is an investor. And the person that's going to pay the most is not the investor. So it makes more sense to remove or wait till the tenant leaves so you can sell it without the tenant in place, right? Sometimes, you know, there's this window where maybe the lease is running up in like a month, month and a half, and the tenant is perfect. The house actually looks amazing because the tenant has unbelievable taste, and they're clean and they're neat. And, you know, that 1% of the time, I'm like, sell it with a tenant in it because the lease is running up soon. They're going to be cooperative and the house looks amazing. But the majority of the time, that's not the case. So that's why you might want to sell it to an investor. In fact, I'll create another video of how to sell it with a tenant in it, right? Because that is a separate conversation. But it's a personal thing. You know, should you sell to an investor? Well, you have to ask yourself, if I have time, right, and somebody's willing to lend me the money, you're always going to net more money if you put in the work in the right places and you have somebody guiding you there. If you don't have time and you don't want to fool around with having to have anybody do work, matter of convenience, then selling to an investor at a lower dollar might make sense. I will tell you, if you create leverage among investors, you're always going to make more money. So for more tips like these, stay tuned. As always, make it a great day. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to me on social media, text me, or give me a call, right? We're here to help. We're here to make you smarter. And we're here to help you win as a buyer and a seller in the marketplace. Take care.